Hello and welcome to a revision session looking at how I can use specific evidence to develop my paragraph. So let's have a look at this example of a paragraph here. So we've just taken a random essay question and in this case we're going to have a lack of specific evidence. The structure of society only changed a little for women. For example, during the Civil War, because many men were away from towns involved in fighting, some women started running estates for their husbands. So we've got an example there already of some relatively vague evidence. Some women started running estates for their husbands. However, this was short-lived change, and after the Civil Wars ended, women were expected to return to their traditional roles. This shows there was a fairly limited change to the structure of society for women, as the change was short-lived. So, although this first part of the paragraph has made a valid point and it's accurate in some ways, there's no real evidence backing up that point. The thing that makes historians really good lawyers is the fact that they have really good evidence to back up the argument they're making, and this is a bit wishy-washy. Okay, let's have a look at what else is written. Additionally, changes to the structure of society for women because some religious groups thought it was important for women to be educated so that they could teach their children about their religion. This was a major change, as previously it had been deemed unnecessary for women to be literate. Before we go any further, and this is a fairly long sentence, so that's something else to consider, we've got that some religious groups thought it was important for women to be educated. Which ones? There's no real specific evidence there, just that some did. No indication of how many either. So it makes the point, again, not particularly strong. This newfound literacy enabled some women to become more involved in politics, for example, signing and presenting petitions. So again, we've got an example of something that they're now able to do. They're now signing and presenting petitions to government, but they haven't mentioned any specific women or any specific petitions that are being put forward. So again, this is, although accurate, is a fairly limited piece of evidence. It wouldn't stand up in a court of law. However, this development was also limited as not all women had access to this. Whilst it is true that some women benefited from the access to education and opportunities to have more powers to decide how their households and estates were run, these changes were more limited and short-lived than those that occurred as a result of the rise of the gentry. Therefore, the rise of the gentry was a more significant reason for the structure of society changing. Okay. So there's some good things in here. There's a clear argument that they're making. They keep linking back to the question. There's a nice link back to the main question at the end. But actually, each piece of evidence that they've tried to include has been fairly vague. So let's have a look at how this could be developed further. Okay, so here is the same paragraph, but this time with more specific evidence. The structure of society only changed a little for women. For example, during the Civil War, because men were away from towns and involved in fighting, individuals like Lucy Hutchinson and Mary Banks have been documented as running estates for their husbands. So we've got immediately there some specific examples. Lucy Hutchinson and Mary Banks, who were running estates for their husbands. So that's much more specific evidence, so it's more persuasive. We've got, however, this was a short-lived change. After the Civil Wars ended, these women were expected to return to their traditional roles. This shows there was a fairly limited change to the structure of society for women, as the change was short-lived. Additionally, the changes to the structure of society for women because groups like the Puritans and Quakers believed it was important for women to be educated. So here we've mentioned which specific groups wanted changes. So the Puritans and the Quakers believing it was important for women to be educated so that they could teach their children about their religion. This was a major change, as previously it had been deemed unnecessary to educate women, and this newfound literacy enabled some women to also become more involved in politics. For example, another piece of specific evidence here, 10,000 women in 1643 being literate enough to organise and sign a petition to Parliament about the imprisonment of John Lilburne. So again, this is much more specific than the evidence we saw in the earlier paragraph where it just said that it could enable them to sign petitions. This shows some really specific examples which make the point much stronger, that we know that there really were 10,000 women, which is a lot of women, involved in signing and organising a petition. However, This development was also limited. Although some women were given access to education, there were only ever 4 schools established by Quakers to teach girls. So again, a nice specific piece of evidence. Only ever 4 schools established by the Quakers to teach girls. So this shows exactly how limited the change was, rather than just saying it was limited or not everyone had access to it. They've specifically mentioned that there were only ever 4 schools. Many Puritans continued to believe that educating women was dangerous. Whilst it is true that some women benefited from the new access to education and opportunities to more powers to decide how their households and estates were run, these changes were much more limited and short-lived than those that occurred because of the rise of the gentry. Therefore, the rise of the gentry was a more significant reason for the structure of society changing. So you can see, just by adding, because the rest of the paragraph is exactly the same, just by adding these specific bits of evidence to back up the points that are being made, the whole argument of the paragraph is much more persuasive. So remember, when you're writing your paragraphs, try to include specific evidence to back up your points. Good luck with your revision.